It's a slow curve low on the Babe swings. It's a long one going out toward right center. Dingler's backing up against the wall. He can't get it. It's in there. Another home run for the Bambino. So Babe hits his second home run of the day.
Great is baseball, the national tonic, the revival of hope, the restorer of confidence, the sporting news.
Tell me about Billy Webb. What kind of guy was he? What's your recollections of him?
Kind of quiet.
Quiet?
Wasn't for a guy that was actually running things. He's kind of quiet and not bossy. That's what I know about Billy. Of course, I know pretty much through my dad.
Now, how did that happen? How did your dad know Billy Webb?
Well, my dad started coming up here. Oh, I would imagine around 1904, 5, or 6. And he and a fellow named Joe Peterson, they were early. They liked photography,
Right.
and they would come up and they'd take pictures in old Celoron Park. If anybody had a great big fish, they'd take a picture of
No
the
kidding.
man and the fish. Oh yes, and they didn't make a great big business out of it, but they did like photography, and they did a little bit of it. So I don't know if he were here before Billy or not. Billy, of course, was a real good minor league ball player.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he was a major league fielder,
Ah,
but he was not a major league hitter.
is that right?
There's quite a few that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, even in those years, you had to hit, I would assume, probably 275, 280 as an infielder to stick in the majors. Or otherwise, you were a little bit of a detriment, you know.
What was Billy Webb's background?
I never knew.
Yeah.
I never knew. He was enough older than I that he was somewhat my dad's age.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really never knew. Kate, his oldest daughter, he had two girls.
Okay.
Kate I knew. I think Kate was a year or two older than I. But I knew Kate real good. And then the other daughter was born after Billy had passed away.
Oh, really?
Now, I can't remember her first name now.
Joan?
Yeah.
Now, what do you remember about Billy? He had a baseball team, right? He was a manager of a team. What was the name of the team?
On the Spiderwebs.
Spiderwebs?
Yeah.
What kind of, was it a semi-pro team?
Well, it wasn't a league team as such. It just was exhibition, you
Right.
know.
Mhm.
But we got a lot of good clubs in, not just the great ones. I mean, like the Crawfords came, Homestead Grays came, House of David came. Oh, there were some other ones, but the ones that impressed me, the House of David, they were good. And of course, they had that old-fashioned pepper game, you know, where the ball went back and forth between 3 or 4 of them, you know. They were good at it, and they were a good ball club. Of course, the Crawfords were real good because they had Josh Gibson as catcher and they had Buck Leonard at first base. The other ones I never knew too well, although they had some good pitching. They had some good pitching too. They were a good ball club.
Now, what else? Now, do you remember any specific game? Like, let's talk about in 1921. It was announced. In fact, I'll show you this. You were.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that time period?
Well, I was only 5 years old, so I can't remember too much about it. But I think even at 5, Babe Ruth impressed you.
Yep.
There was no question. What impressed me was that he had such a long backswing. And when he hit the ball, it really went, I'll tell you. And of course, they had, before the ball game, they had, like they're doing in the majors now, a little bit of practice and the fans show up, you know. And like people talk about the ball that went over the top of the bathhouse and into the lake. But what impressed me more than anything was, of course, that was down the right field line, and he being a right field, being a right hand or left-hander, of course, he put them there. But what impressed me, we had a row of big, great, huge poplar trees, and he was putting those balls in right center and center field, clear into the top of those poplar trees. I swear, probably 450, 500 feet, clear into the top of those trees. The outfielders didn't even have a chance to get them because they'd eventually drop down to the ground. But well, that was something. He really hit them.
Why were you there?
Well, as I say, my dad knew Billy. My dad liked baseball. My dad liked baseball. My dad grew up in Warren. He was born in Grand Valley. They came to Warren to continue their education, he and my aunt. And Warren was in what they call the Iron and Ore League. And the old great Pirate shortstop. That's where he was playing. He hadn't gone up to the Pirates yet.
Wagner.
Yep. And he said then you could tell that he was not going to be with and I can't remember now which team he was with, but you could tell he wasn't going to stay in the minors very much longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we of course got hit by the Depression, and we didn't see as much Major League Baseball as they would have liked. So
Then you moved from Warren. Your dad moved.
No, my dad did.
Oh, your dad did.
Yeah. My dad and mother met down in Warren.
Ah, okay.
My mother had just come from the Carlisle Indian School down in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and she came up back to the reservation, wanted to work, so she came down river on the Pennsylvania Railroad down to Warren, and she worked for a family, and I can't think of his name now. My dad happened to be working for him also. That's where they met. So when they finally decided to get married, a good friend of my dad's had already married and had moved up to Celoron. They convinced him they ought to come to Celoron. That was 1914.
Mm-hmm.
A year later, I was born, of course.
Yeah. Well, there was professional baseball in 1914 and 1915, and Billy Webb was the manager of the Warren team in 1914, and also
That I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where I knew him too.
exactly, and then became the manager in 1915 here at Celoron. And then through that connection, probably, did your dad socialize with Billy Webb?
Not particularly. They knew each other enough to, when they'd see each other down front of the post office, they might talk a little bit, but I mean, they didn't otherwise really socialize.
Yeah.
Although they knew each other real good.
Then this day occurred. What do you remember about, this was in October of 1921, what do you remember about the ballpark itself? Celoron Park.
The ballpark itself, I thought it was good. In those years, it hadn't deteriorated like it eventually did, and it was in what I'd say pretty good shape, I thought.
Describe it. I guess I never saw it, and I've only seen a couple pictures of it.
Well,
It was where the apartments are.
Where Ellicott Shores is now, that was the outfield.
That was the outfield.
And so the outfield, in a sense, rimmed the lake. See, the lake comes down out of Burtis Bay, and right there, where the ballpark was, it swings to the right and becomes eventually the Chautauqua River, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We called it the outlet, which it is. I mean, it's the outlet of the lake. The ballpark was so straight from home plate. If Ruth hits one, he was hitting north and a little bit west. That's the way the ballpark was situated.
Mm-hmm.
So the right field line was straight north just about, and the left field line was straight west just about.
What kind of stands did they have?
Well, we had a big grandstand. Pretty good one. I couldn't tell you how many it seated, probably 400 anyway. And then we had bleachers either side of the grandstand. Bleachers would sit probably a couple of hundred, maybe three. So I would say probably you'd get probably 5,000 there with ease, and I mean it would crowd in more, I assume.
Did the cars sort of rim the outfield?
Yeah. The cars came in off of. Now there was an old ice house that used to sit right on the lake, and it was about 50, 60 feet, maybe close to 100 from the left field line. Of course, it didn't interfere with anything because there was enough distance between, and there was an opening there. You could drive in off of what we call Jackson Avenue. There was Jackson and Duquesne, and you could drive in there, and you could also drive in from the park. But they didn't. That's where people came ordinarily. People would come in out of the park to come to the ball game, parking obviously on the street somewhere, and they probably came for both the park and the ball game. Yeah, that's what they used to do. They used to rim the outfield with cars. And you could do it. You could probably do it 2 or 3 deep. You could have one row and then another row. And that would be on the left field line, and it would be between. And there was a big wooden fence around it. I mean, all ballparks want paying customers. They don't want just people to watch. They want them to pay to watch.
So the fence was along the foul lines, though, right? That's where it had the fence?
Pretty much, close.
So the outfield itself, though, there was no fence. It was just the lake?
Yeah, it was just a lake. Well, sometimes people would be in boats and they'd be watching.
I'll be darned.
Of course, they weren't seeing as good as we were.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they little observation, I guess.
Now, do you remember, other than what you mentioned on this day when Babe Ruth came to Celoron, did they have a parade? Did they?
That I don't remember. I was only a little over 5.
Right.
And as I say, the most impressive thing to me was when he hit the ball and it went so far.
Yeah.
That was really impressed me the most. Now they talk about actually being a ball game. That I don't remember too much about it. I can remember before the game, Ruth hitting, and I thought my dad told me that he got a couple of minor leaguers to come with him. In other words, he either couldn't convince some of his Yankee teammates, or he didn't want to pay them the amount maybe that they wanted. Anyway, I think Dad told me that he had a couple of 2 or 3 minor leaguers with him. He paid them, but I mean, obviously, he probably didn't pay them nearly as much as he would have had to pay some star. Anyway, there probably was a game, but that portion I don't remember. I mean, a few things stand out to me.
Yeah.
That wasn't one of them.
Did you, do you remember the size of the crowd there? Was it a rainy day? Was it a clear day? Or do you remember anything about the day?
No. But it seems to me we didn't have very many rainy days. It seems to me, isn't it funny? I remember game after game when real good ball clubs would come in, good semi-pro ball games would do. And always is weather. I don't remember being weathered out ever.
Yeah.
Now maybe it happened, but not very often then, according to that.
Did you work at the ballpark?
Well, the Coleman boys used to take care of the infield. They had a big sled-like made of wood, and it had spikes driven down through it, and they would drag that behind the car, and that way it would soften up the infield. They'd drag that around the infield, and then we'd cut the grass in the outfield. Now, I wasn't old enough to where I assumed too much. I just helped a little bit.
Yeah.
But then when the ball game started, we had what we called ball boys. Our job, there was one on, we sat clear in the back of the grandstand so that we could look down when the ball went out over the top of the grandstand or out over the bleachers, we could see where it went, and there'd be a boy or a young man on each. There was a gate each side, and when the foul ball went out, it was our job to follow the flight of the ball and to point out where the ball went. And then there was always a crowd of boys that wanted to come in. The boy that got the ball then could come in the ball game.
I'll be darned.
And once in a while, the kid that picked the ball up took and ran with it. And but the boys on the gate, they were about half grown. They were probably 15, 16, 17 along in there. I can remember. They were older than I. And they'd chase him and eventually get the ball. Except when the ball went over into Louis Lachine's yard. And Louis didn't like Billy. So if a ball got onto his yard, Louis Lachine would run and grab the ball. They claimed he had several bushels of baseballs. I never knew how many. But he'd try to run out and beat the boy to the ball. Now and then he'd succeed.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't give the ball to the boy. Yeah. He didn't like Billy.
Yeah. Why is that?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. Now, do you remember any other games that are very memorable to you at Celoron? When any of the other barnstorming teams would come in?
I remember the Boston Red Sox came in.
Mm-hmm. What do you remember about that?
Swat Erickson shut him out with 3 hits.
My golly.
So I understand he was offered a tryout. He'd been up at the Senators, you know, and then he worked some in the minors, and then he came home pretty much retired. But on a weekend, he would pitch for Billy now and then if he felt good, and he could still throw a few innings of pretty good ball.
Yeah.
You know, I'll never forget watching him warm up. What we call a split finger now, which goes down, you know. Well, maybe he didn't throw it in a split finger fashion, but that ball would come up there and would just dive. This was during the warm-up, so you can imagine what the batter faced with. Yeah, Swat was good.
Yeah. What about Hugh Bedient?
He was equally good. Billy went between the two of them. They were pretty much the pitchers that Billy got to face whomever came in. And they were still good enough that it was a good ball game.
Do you remember anything else about the spider webs? Some of the ball players, any of the other ball players they had?
The only one that I remember real good was Nagel. He played third base.
Joe Nagel.
Yeah. I remember him. He was another one. He probably could have played Major League Baseball. He too, like Billy, was a Major League infielder. But he couldn't hit them. Although he could hit in this league, you know, at this caliber. And then Billy used to get a guy out of Warren called Howard Onick. He'd get Howard up, and Howard was a right-hander. And every now and then, he could put a ball out down the left field line into the lake. And that wasn't quite as much of a feat as it was down going over the top of the bathhouse. But Howard was about the only one that succeeded in doing it on a regular basis. Oh gosh, he could hit. He was a big man.
Big guy.
He was big.
Rudy Carlson?
Don't remember him too good.
Yeah.
I know he played, and but I don't remember him that good.
How about Lehman Peterson?
Don't remember him that much.
Yeah,
I knew who he was,
yeah.
but you know.
What else? Now, as far as, of course, Celoron is known for its baseball. What happened to the stadium ultimately? You know, I don't really know. I know that the New York Penn League.
Yeah, they came in at what, 39?
39, yeah.
I think it was 39, and I thought it was a pretty good thing. But must be they figured that they couldn't draw the people from Jamestown up here. But
How would they get from Jamestown to Celoron then?
that's what I'm trying to remember. When did we get the buses? I think 36. I think the buses started in 36. So the streetcars had gone out.
Yeah.
We kind of liked the idea of the buses coming in, but then we kind of reached a point where we kind of sorry that the streetcars had gone.
Yeah.